And I'm sitting there and they're telling stories like this one Fallen Saints guy was telling me a story about how a dude had owed him a bunch of fucking money, so they stripped him naked, threw him in the trunk of the car, and then gave him a handgun and made him rip off 7-Elevens to pay the debt back.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I am your host, Todd Rennebaum. For those of you that have been listening for a long time, hey, it's a new beginning of the podcast. It's a new intro. I kind of like it. You don't have to hear that whole big long intro of who I am and all that stuff anymore. So I think I'm going to keep it this way. Yeah, a little sneak peek of the episode and kind of straight into the intro. Well, I'm glad you're here, everyone, because it's another great episode this week. I am talking with my friend Steve. We actually met in Pine Lodge, which is addiction treatment center, and he's also a new author. His book is Punx Not Dead. Punx spelled P-U-N-X, and I'm not just saying this because he's a friend of mine, but because he's got an incredible story. We hardly touch any of it in this episode. I mean, we touched on a lot of it, but there's way more to his story in the book. Steve actually was homeless for a while in Vancouver and living on Hastings Street. And for those of you who are not from Canada, Hastings Street is in Vancouver, and it's like the Skid Row, or it's like the worst street to live on while homeless in Canada. It's lots of hobos and drug users and prostitution and all that kind of stuff. But before we get to the episode, I want to talk about next week, because boy, do we have another good one next week. Probably the most popular guest I've had is a young person named Trash. And if you listen to that episode, you know that Trash suffers with DID, or dissociative identity disorder. Old school people still call it multiple personalities or whatnot. And so I'm talking with her again, this time about histrionic disorder. That's very different. That's a cluster B disorder, and she talks a lot about that and just about what's happening in her life right now. In a couple of weeks, I am talking with a young lady named Juno, or June Bug System. She also has DID, and it's different than Trash's version of DID. It's hard to explain. You have to listen to that episode as well. It's coming up in a few weeks. But anyway, next week I'm talking with Trash about histrionic disorder and what that looks like for Trash. But for now, we're going to listen to Steve. So without further ado, I give you Steve.
So I wrote the book because I had heard someone had said a long time ago that writing things down is a therapeutic way to express your emotions, like learning how to cope and stuff. So I had started writing poetry when I was like 14 or 15 years old, and I wrote a lot. And every time I wrote, I would lose a book. I would lose all of my poetry. But like the process of writing and getting better at writing never left. It's like Eminem. I had heard one of his producers had said that Eminem writes and has books and books and books, and he's always writing. And he says he uses like not even 1% of what he writes, but it's the expression of writing, and they're always getting better. So I would write and write and write, try to figure out what my emotions were and try to figure out how to like understand them better, because there's a difference between knowing what an emotion is and understanding what an emotion is, right?
Yeah.
So by the time I had got to a point where, oh, I could write a book and really put my stuff down, I had mastered in my head. I had mastered how to write to a level that I could articulate my feeling and my thoughts. And so I'd started writing this thing, and it moves in and out of like my childhood, from when I was adopted into when I got high for the first time on mushrooms and what the experience that was, into losing friends, to drinking and driving accidents, to the first time I had a gun pulled on me in the hood in Saskatoon. And it was just like it weaves in and out of these weird stories. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, I'll never get this published. Like this is just a it's just a story to myself really so that I could because that whoever had told me that, writing is a therapeutic way of coping is like I wrote this as a narrative of my own life so that I could hear myself think myself through these things, right? And I had given it to a few friends because they were really intrigued by it and they're like, you have to fucking get this published. And I sent it to Chris Walters, who writes punk books out in Vancouver. So when I was homeless and I was living on the streets of Vancouver, Chris Walters was this dude that got off the train at commercial drive station every day. And my buddy Krusty, we had great names. I was Spanx, and there was Krusty, and there's another guy named Germs, and just like real
Boner
skinny.
champ.
Oh yeah, just like greasy fucking skid punks, and Chris would get off the train every day and give $5 to Krusty. And I was like, who's that? Who's that guy with all the tattoos that has all the money? Like $5 is a ton of cash. And he goes, well, that Chris Walters, and he handed me a book, and it was Welfare Wednesdays, and it was about this guy that works construction, but he smokes lots of crack and drinks lots of beer, and it's just his journey of like losing his job and going on welfare and finding this girl, and they party too much, and I think they end up like ODing but not die. Oh man, it's crazy. So I was like, I fell in love with Chris Walters, and some of you can see some of his stylings in my book, um, but like I got the idea that I should send it to him, and he told me no go. It's pandemic. No one's ever going to publish your book right now. It's too hard to sell, like on like lower platforms, right? And then I sent it to a few other places. I can't remember the name. Someone in Ontario, and off the top of my head, I can't think. No response back. It's like screw it. And I went to Lulu and KDP and all those self-publishing sites, and I hate Bezos, but he offered me the best deal. $2.33 a book or whatever, but he was taking like $6 on top of that. So I'm making fuck all on my book, but yeah. Yeah, right. And it sucks because you put your heart and soul into these things and you don't really make, and that's why I'm a socialist communist. There you go.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't believe in capitalism whatsoever, although I live in a system where we need to oblige. It is what it is. Thank you, Bezos. And the book starts off like I started writing the first chapter, which was about my first experience on these little tiny devil mushrooms that drove me and my friends all insane. But I realized that that was really an odd place to start. It was just kind of like in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas when he's sitting in his hotel room and he talks about the waves crashing down
Mm-hmm.
around and pulling back in the American way and all that kind of stuff. And which is it's I think I beautifully wrote that chapter. I think I did a really good job of expressing like how dark that trip was. But I was like, that's a really fucked up place to start a book. So I was like, maybe I should add a couple of things. So I wrote a couple of chapters at the very beginning just about my upbringing. So like I was adopted at birth. My birth mom was like kind of shamed into adopting me out. And she went through Catholic family adoption services or whatever. And at that point, they had like a 72-hour hold on babies, like guns in the States. Like you fill out this paperwork, but you can't get it until the end of the weekend. So my parents are sitting at the hospital waiting to get me, and then they couldn't get me because there's this hold on the baby. So my mom said, if you don't give him to his parents right now, then I am going to take the baby back. And so then they had to amend their policy right then and there. So my existence as as um as irrelevant as I thought it was while I was using actually had until like recently when I found this out, it was actually fairly significant. So now babies aren't left in a natal ward like without any human contact. Like it goes mom to parents like real quick because of my birth, right? Um, so actually, yeah, yay, go Steve. And and then I kind of explained that and just kind of the effects that had on my childhood about like having um
Like separation anxiety, almost like this.
yeah, well, and I would say more of like a weird abandonment, like a confused abandonment
Right.
because I was never abandoned, but I knew I was adopted at birth because my parents told me.
Hmm.
So it was more like this weird lack of identity. I knew I was adopted and I knew I was loved and I had a family, but I never felt like I was a part of anybody because they all knew who they were and I had no idea. So I took that into my teenage, and so now you're a teenager, and I grew up in like North Battleford, Watrous, Wadena is where I spent most of my formidable years, is Wadena, Saskatchewan, which is like six reserves and a bunch of farm kids. And there's so then all the reserves out there, they have lots of culture, right? There were some of the few reserves, like Fishing Lake, they like there was always something going on. There's like tons of culture there. Um, the farm kids, Ukrainian, so there's tons of Ukrainian dance. There's like Hutterites and stuff like that. So you see all these sects of people. They all have their place. They all have their cultures. They have their languages and all this kind of stuff. And then there's this redheaded kid, and I had like dreadlocks, a Marilyn Manson T-shirt, and kilt. And I had no fucking idea who I was, right? And I just kind of lost in this place of that. So yeah, like, I tried to make sense of what everything was.
Was it noticeable for other people how, like, did you stick out to other people and like they said stuff, or was it more internalizing? You internalized it.
Oh
Oh,
God, no. They were like, oh, because my dad was a cop for one,
oh,
RCMP.
oh.
So
The
I'm this
plot thickens.
dun dun dun. Yeah. Bum, yeah. So it's either or. Yeah. Yeah. Life is a comedy and a tragedy. And so then I'm the cops kid with weird dreadlocks and a kilt. So yeah, everyone was like, fuck is that guy? Like, that's a weird person. So I like it wasn't just within me. I was trying to express myself and I didn't know how.
Hmm.
And then my friends, they weren't as weird as me, but they were on the cusp. And we started like grindcore bands and punk bands, and like we were the first grindcore band in in the
Wadena.
rural area.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we thought we found our niche, but what comes along with that is drugs
Hmm.
and alcohol. And we had smoked a little bit of weed, and we were primarily alcoholics at 15 years old because that's rural Saskatchewan for you.
Hmm.
But we were playing a show in Saskatoon, this grind fest that we helped put on and start. And one of my friends came to the van, like our tour van, and was like, and had this light bulb broken in half. And I was like, hey, this is a new drug. It's called meth. And we're like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And man, I was like, this is it. This is what I've been missing my whole life. The whole first 17 years
It's math.
is meth. Yeah, this is great. Uh, and then we could just fast forward 20 fucking years and yeah, you could just imagine, but we won't. Like I'll go into it, but yeah, it was that was like the beginning of the hard drugs, right?
Hmm. So when did you make yourself out to Vancouver and become homeless? Was it with the band you were touring around, or was it just?
Well, by the time I had made it to Vancouver, I had like done a bunch of hitchhiking already. So I'd like go up to Saskatoon all the time. My first hitchhiking trip was to Reinventing the Steel Pantera.
Hmm.
And I wanted to see that. And I caught a bunch of rides and found out it was really easy. So I was like, okay, let's do this, right? So then I ended up going to Calgary, and then Calgary wasn't far enough. So hopped over to Vancouver and I stayed there for a couple almost 2 years the first time I went. And that was in '04 was the first time I went. And I think I was like 23, 24 years old. 22. I was 22 years old the first time I hitchhiked to Van. So I'm in Vancouver. And that's when I tried needles for the first time. That's where I got into IV drug use. And you're sitting over by the car wash on Commercial. I think it was a car wash. Everything's a little fuzzy. Um, Loved it. It was the most amazing thing. Heroin and crystal meth.
Hmm.
And yeah, what a weird time, man. Because everything, because so I had hitchhiked out there and I was busking on the streets, and I had always said like streets didn't choose me, I chose the streets. Like I chose to be here, right? Like I wasn't like kicked to the curb per se. I didn't like come from a bad family. Like I liked being out there, or so I like lied to myself that I liked being out there. Man, being hungover in 30 above weather in BC, sleeping under a bridge, um, while trains are going over and everybody's going to work is just not, you can lie to yourself all you want, but at the end of the day, it's fucking shitty. Then you see everybody, you're 22 years old and like you think that you should have more than you do, which you know, I didn't even graduate, and you see all these people like living their lives, and you're like, no, I like this. This is where I chose to be, but inside you're like, this is hell. This is fucking hell on earth because everyone has a life and I don't. Like this isn't a life. I'm a piece of shit.
Hmm. I I can kind of relate. I didn't get that. I'll say quote unquote. I didn't get that bad, but I did romanticize my addiction and be like, if I die homeless on a beach somewhere drunk, that's the way to live, man. It's like, and then yeah, shit hit the fan. I was
Well,
like, no, this actually sucks. This is terrible.
this is fucking terrible. And notice how you're like on a beach. So you just like all of the good shit that you're like fucking oh man, like yeah, I smoke crack and it's the worst, but I'm on a beach, motherfucker. Like everything's better. You're like, yeah, I was on a beach, I was on Hastings. And so it wasn't there's no fucking sand unless you call crack or meth sand, and then there you go. Um yeah. Yeah, you can grandiose your shit and you can justify and rationalize all you want, but it's like at the end of the day, um, life is hell and you know it.
Hmm.
You just like reiterate this lie to yourself just to like keep yourself moving. What is in the valley chart is like using with inferiors, and then one day you are the inferior,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And then people like are coming down to your level to use, and you're like, oh no, I'm ruining people's lives.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You lose morals. You use with people with lower morals than you, and then you're like, no, man, I used with people with much higher morals than me. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah.
But that doesn't compute properly. Yeah. Oh, I'm the inferior. Yeah.
Yeah. Whoop.
Yeah. But on Hastings, there's no, you can't be the inferior. Like there's always someone lower than you.
Right.
Um, and you know what? That's actually just for all of your listeners out there that never been to Hastings. If you haven't been to Hastings, it's actually a beautiful community. Like to look at it's disgusting. Pigeon Park and Blood Alley. Like I had a 10-year-old kid selling me drugs from his mom's window and stuff like that. So it is what
Huh.
it is. But the the unity within the community was just something that I had never experienced before. They have each other's backs. Violence doesn't happen between community members as much as it is that people come in from out of community trying to start shit, or they don't understand the protocol of the street, right? Um, so you have like these sex workers and drug dealers that are looking out for each other, and it's really odd. It was just kind of like a beautiful thing to witness, and I think that's the only thing that kept me there for that long. Um, I had hung out with a bunch of like punks, and we would drink at like the art gallery and stuff. Some of us would wander down to Hastings, and that's where we would buy our drugs, and we would hang out with some of the people down there, and they'd take you under their wing, and they would like teach you how to survive on the street. Um, because they were professional street people, right? And some of us, we were street people, but this is just a completely different thing. And you get kind of assimilated into the community. So if anybody ever wondered, oh, it's so scary down there. Oh, it looks so gross. It's like actually for how much trauma there is and how much drugs there are, uh, the coexisting with each other was it was amazing. It was just amazing the things that people would do for each other. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, even in treatment, it was like everybody. Nah. You know what? That was a lie. I was gonna say everybody gets along and everybody like supports each other, but nah, I've seen almost fist fights at in treatment when I was working there and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not
Yeah,
entirely
but
true.
I could say it's around the same though, because there's still people dealing with things. My brother and I, we fist fight, or we used to, right?
Hmm.
So, when I speak about violence, I don't mean like there wasn't the odd like when you're on the street, the way that you settle things is violence.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
But it's not, but it's just like punching your brother out. It's
Right.
not like you're stabbing your brother kind of thing. I mean, like, yeah, of course there was some crazy stuff that went down, but all in all, it's just not what you would expect. Yeah.
Was there gangs in Hastings? Like, was there gang life too, or
Absolutely.
yeah?
Then they're usually the ones that ran it, right? So then lots of like I don't I would I wouldn't get into kind of like who it was because I don't want to assume because I was pretty loaded at the time. But there
Right.
was like a lot of like Mexican mafia, I believe,
Mm.
biker gangs. And we all know who the three-piece patch wearing dominants are down there. And so yeah, like they run the streets and then they get their guys to deal, and they do it in whatever way that they see fit. But because the community is what it was, it's not like they needed to enforce with an iron fist.
Right.
People just kind of they would just work within it.
Right.
It
Were
was
were you
peaceful.
ever gang affiliated at all, or not really?
Not at that point.
Hmm. Oh, okay.
Not at that point. Um, Before that and after that, but in Vancouver, not at all.
Oh, I see. More
But
Saskatchewan
here in
gangs.
Regina, like yeah, in Saskatchewan, NS, like because I owned a tattoo shop, Crouching Tiger on Dudney,
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
yeah, me and Rob Krauser, who is all over the place. Like he does interviews with everybody, and he's on CBC all the goddamn time. And I was like, when do I get to do my interview? And
It's me, I
yay,
guess.
here we are. Yeah, and
Sorry, it's just me.
no, this is awesome. I love this. This is the shit. I'm upset that my family is having such a rough time, and I have to do it with. But it is what it is. Anyway,
Hello, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I just want to give a little quick break to remind you of a wonderful episode you can listen to, episode 38 with Alyssa Kaufman. It is called I Have OCD and Created a New Therapy Modality to Help Others. Alyssa is a psychologist and experienced sufferer of OCD. She has created her own type of therapy she calls RIP-R. This new therapy helps with OCD, addiction, and any other compulsive obsessive behavioral problems. Please check out episode 38 with Alyssa Kaufman. Back to the episode.
so then we own the tattoo shop, and we were in NS area, so everybody I knew was NS, or everybody that was in a gang was NS, or the Hells Angels. Because I worked at before it became the Gaslight, it was Doc Tonics, and I was a bartender bar back there. And so the Angels would come in and party every once in a while before Joan banned it, and Richard ended up buying it and turning it over to the Gaslight.
Where were your parents during a lot of this stuff? Were they supportive? Or were they
Absolutely
like,
not. No,
yeah,
no,
okay,
no.
I didn't think so.
My parents were living in Regina and thinking I was going to die because I was so involved with so much stuff. And my mom had been working for CSIS and she was a stigographer and she listened to wiretaps on some of the gangs and the 81. And she would come home from work sometimes and call me up and be like, I know who you're hanging out with.
Wow. So you're
So then I knew that, and then I would tell them, and then they give me free drugs or money.
for
Um,
for man. So your dad's a cop, your mom works for CSIS and is listening to wiretaps of you and your gang friends. Well, not you,
yeah,
but your gang friends.
yeah,
Concerned about your life, and you're then telling the gang members, just so you know, CSIS is listening.
he's listening to you on the phone, or
What's the
they're
American version of CSIS? FBI? No.
FBI or AT. Like they have a bunch of them.
Yeah, I guess.
NSA.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So for my
yeah.
American listeners, which is about 30% of my audience, the numbers are going up in
Oh, is it
America.
really?
So, yeah.
Oh no way.
Anyway, so they'll be like, "What's Saskatchewan and Saskatoon? Like, what the fuck are they?"
Well, it's snow 11 months out of the year. We live in igloos, and there is literally no running water unless you're running down to the river to get it.
But we have Tim Hortons.
We do. We have lots of them. Yeah. They're,
uh, anyway, so okay, where'd we leave off? Oh, right, you were getting free drugs and money from gangs because you're telling them about your mom.
See, and you know what? Like I could go on and tell you stories about, and you just like, this is all bullshit. My life is so fucking crazy. Like there's just so many layers to it. But yeah, so then yeah, my mom would tell me stuff, and I go back to the drug dealers and be like, "There's a camera on your house. They're watching you. They saw me come in out of your front door." how do you know that? My mom works for CSIS. They're like, what the fuck? Here's free drugs. And so, yeah, it just kind of worked that way. And I had moved
Did you ever
from
threaten any of them?
Vancouver.
Be like, I'm going to tell my mom.
Yeah, I'll tell my, I wish I could like use that shit. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Anyway, you were saying you went back to
Uh,
Vancouver? Is
well,
that what you
I
said?
like, so then that it was after I owned the tattoo shop that I'd moved to Vancouver. I went to the fucking streets and I came back a way better drug addict. Right? I came back a way better criminal. I came back like a way more violent human being. Um, and just through osmosis, it's not like the community was violent, but it's just the way that you had to handle things. It was a lot more aggressive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then that aggression, when flamed in a violent situation, it was just it multiplies. So I moved back to Regina, and I just got into trouble all the time. I was constantly getting arrested um, for drunken disorderly, assaults. I was getting kicked out of bars. I used to frequent O'Hanlon's all the time, and every summer I'd get kicked out.
Hmm.
I threatened to stab someone, or I threatened to shoot someone, or I was getting into a fight, or like I was, 120 pounds soaking wet, and I'm trying to kick the shit out of like 6'4" bouncers because I just, and so every summer, Niall O'Hanlon would kick me out, and I'd hitchhike to Calgary, or I'd hitchhike back to Vancouver, and I'd go at it again. And every time I went out to Calgary, or every time I went out to Vancouver, I would come back worse, knowing more people, having connections with more drugs, and getting more drugs brought into the city, or me doing more drugs and just becoming progressively like more insane, more psychotic,
Mm-hmm.
skinnier and crazier, really, at
Hmm.
the end of the day.
Were you ever trafficking or anything like that?
Not trafficking per se, but like I dealt a lot.
Right. Okay.
So like um I wasn't the one that was bringing stuff in,
Hmm.
although I was at the house where they bring it to.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So when it got out of the car, we were the ones that bagged it up and sold it on the street, or gave it to the guys that were going to sell it on the street, or I was working for the dude that was happening with. So it was just like I was in and out of it all the time.
Hmm. So what was your final? What was like your bottom that made you switch and get sober?
There was some people like have one bottom,
Mm-hmm.
but mine was like I used to joke all the time, and I said like I hit my bottom and then I just kind of skidded across it for a really long time. And I was like, oh, this is nice. And
Can't get worse.
can't get worse than this. I'm already skidding. Yeah. It kind of started. I had moved to Humboldt, Saskatchewan, which is just like 110 kilometers away from Saskatoon, east of Saskatoon, 200K north of Regina.
What is that in miles? No, I'm kidding. Doesn't matter.
So I'm living in Humboldt so I can be closer to my oldest daughter. And I ended up living in a house where they were selling crystal meth in this town of 5,000 people. Oddly enough, I just got myself into that group of people again. And I was drinking one day. I went to go see my daughter, who had only lived like 2 blocks away, and she said, "I don't like it when Steven acts like this." My daughter was 3 at the time, same age as this daughter right now is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't know she knew my first name, and it blew me away that she's like, "I don't like Steven like this," and it hurt. So that hurt, and instead of that hurt like stopping me from using right then and there, it kind of like added to the shame and guilt, and I just ended up using more and more and more. But that was the beginning of it. Then okay, so living in this house, my daughter just said what she had said, and it was probably about a month later, and my dog ended up dying. um we had came back from a run to the city to pick up more drugs, and the house was a mess. Someone had broken in. My dog was like panicky, so I had closed all the windows. We cleaned up a little bit, put the dog in the car because he had been kept up in there for like a day. So like, we'll go run him on a back road, we'll come back, and we'll do more investigating on what happened. Well, we ran him. He came back into the car, And as we were pulling back into the house, into the garage, my buddy was sleeping and Loki was sleeping in the back seat. And I said, like, Ryan, time to get up. And then so he's like, oh, okay, whatever. And he gets out of the back of the car and I was like, Loki, get out. And Loki didn't move. And I was like, Loki, get up. And he just didn't fucking move. So I was like, what the hell? And this is the dog that came with me hitchhiking everywhere I went.
Gotcha. Oh, okay.
Yeah, like every day. He's with me every day. We had gone through so much shit. We lived in a hippie commune together out on the island. We were in Hastings together. We lived in Calgary together. Like this dog did everything with me. And he was dead in the back of the car and I lost it. That was like that was probably my breaking point
Hmm.
where everything started to make sense that I was not living the way I wanted to. Like I had left my dog, like my bestest friend in the whole world, so I could go pick up more drugs. And someone broke into my house, and I don't know if they killed my dog or what had happened. Like they fed it poison or whatever. That I didn't have any money to get him autopsied. So now I'm thinking that someone killed my dog. So then I'm sitting at the house, and so this house is where Terror Squad, the Fallen Saints, um, and White Boy Posse were coming to drop drugs off and disperse them throughout.
3 different gangs?
Yeah. So they were
Damn.
all working together. So
Oh,
this
I
is in
see.
2000.
Okay.
This is 2014. So the White Boy Posse had just cut off that guy's head and left it in a ditch in Alberta or whatever. And then the Fallen Saints, there's the Operation for SETI with the Fallen Saints. And Terror Squad was a brand new rank gang in Saskatoon, like MS-13 Canada style,
Hmm.
for your American listeners. And they're not macheting people in the streets, but they're super, super violent guys. And they would have their hangarounds and strikers or prospects or like the lower level dudes coming in, dropping off a bunch of drugs with the people that I lived with, and then heading out. And I'm sitting there and they're telling stories like this one Fallen Saints guy was telling me a story about how a dude had owed him a bunch of fucking money. So they stripped him naked, threw him in the trunk of the car, and then gave him a handgun and made him rip off 7-Elevens to pay the debt back. And I was like, this is fucking crazy. Like these are stories that I used to like laugh at and I used to have been a part of, and I was like, oh man, that'd be so fucking funny. But because my daughter was calling me Steven, my dog had just been fucking murdered in my head he was. And now I'm like looking at the situation I'm in, going, whoa, like this is not who I am. This is not the way I was supposed to be. Like I just let life go and take me. Like the universe just picked me up and took me, and I just kind of fucking went with it. And I had an epiphany, and I call it, like a lucid moment, a moment of lucidity I had. And I called up my mom and dad and said, I need help. So like, get on a bus, go to Saskatoon. We'll put you on a plane, come out to Kelowna.
Oh, they're in Kelowna now.
Now they're in Kelowna. Yeah, so
Okay.
lots have happened. Like we would have to do a series
It's a
of a
different book.
yeah, you read my fucking book. Yeah. So they're like, fly out to Kelowna and we'll try to get you dried out. Obviously, they had too much booze in the house, so they couldn't. So because alcoholic, primarily, and so they flew me back to Regina, and I went into detox there, and I did 18 days in the Regina detox. I came out and started slamming crystal meth again, waiting to get into Pine Lodge. The night before I was going to go into Pine Lodge, me and my buddy had texted each other that we were going to kill our drug dealer. So we had a gun and sawed-off 22 that we had gotten from another buddy. And our friend found out about our plot, ended up buying a 66 pounder, knowing that we would drink the 66 and not killing the guy. Like we would just get really hammered and pass out. And the plan worked. We
Were you going to kill him so that you could quit drugs?
No, we were gonna kill him just to kill him. We got a gun and we're like, oh, he's been fucking us around. He owes us a bunch of money. We'll just shoot him and he'll be dead. We'll take him out to the train yard and cap him. And then our friend was like, oh, let's get this 60 pounder and we'll drink. And they know how bad of alcoholics we are. So we ended up, passing out, wearing nothing but cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. And the next morning I had to go to rehab. So I got picked up. One of my buddies picked me up for the last of my meth, and I went there and I sat in the Pine Lodge waiting room for like 3 hours while they waited for me to sober up a little bit because they fucking knew and they didn't kick me out.
That's impressive because quite often they do.
They do,
Yeah.
which is weird. I was like trying to like not breathe too heavily on them because I smelled like booze. I had like bags under my. I looked like shit. I looked like Skeletor with a red beard. Yeah, yeah. I don't like feeling nice. I like feeling evil. And yeah, and that was the journey of recovery for me was going to rehab.
And that's where we met.
And that's where was it in 2014 that we met?
Oh, you
Or
went
was it?
twice.
Yes, I went twice.
Oh, okay. I think it was 2016 I went.
2016. 16, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
So you
so
relapsed,
I stayed.
obviously.
I did. I did relapse. Um, yeah. So when I was in Pine Lodge that time, I ended up telling, and this is actually the moment that got me clean. So like all those things had happened, I'd been through the life I had been in, and like there's just so much more that the complexity of it all, just like the way that it sat on me mentally. Um, I am a piece of shit, you know. That is how I felt. Like down to my lower depths. I'm a fucking piece of shit, and I believed it wholeheartedly. And all these bad things are happening. I'm like, I don't want to be a piece of shit anymore. And so I had told a guy that I was gonna murder him. I was just gonna stab him in the fucking face. And he, like like that's just something you say to something.
Was this guy in Pine Lodge or no? This
Yeah,
was
he
out.
was just somebody that's in Pine Lodge.
Oh, okay.
And so he was throwing back. So anyway, so when Susan, who's the director at the time, came to work on Monday morning, he ratted me out for saying that I was going to do this. And she says, like, if you don't want to fucking be here, you can leave. Like, you can just get out of here because this is the only place you're going to get help, and then you can be back on your fucking own. And like she swore at me. And the way that she said the words, I couldn't articulate it in any way that would give it like justice. She just said the exact right thing in the exact right tone that it hit me in the soul. And I was like, someone fucking cares. And they're mad that I'm about to throw it away. And I had never had that before. Like I had my mom and dad would cry and stuff, but it just didn't hit. And then when Soon said it, it was just like a brick thrown through a window. Like wake the fuck up. And I just like had, oh my God, I fucked up. I have to sit down. I need to learn. I need to learn everything I need to know about how to get better now because I never want to go through what I just did. And I did. So I went through Pine Lodge and a guy that kept coming in, his name was Josh. He would like from NA and he would do the NA meetings. Well, he was a buddy I used to use drugs with, and he was like 16 months clean, and he told me all about sponsorship and 90 and 90 meetings and like service work and all this shit. So I was like, "You want to be my sponsor?" And he gave me his 1 year token, said, "Yep." And he said, "When you get your 1 year, give that one back to me." And it just created this direct link into a new fucking life. And I latched on and I went to like 180 meetings in 90 days and like the lunch hour and the evening one, and if there's a third one on a day, I'd fucking go to that one too. And I would call them 2 or 3 times a day, and I did my step work by 3 months, and I became area activities chair, and uh, I sat on the area committee. Um, I was the GSR for our home group, which is the president of our home group, and the treasurer within the first months of getting sober because we had lost our whole committee. And I just kind of took over and I kept the Monday night meeting running for years. Um, I joined BACA, which is Bikers Against Child Abuse, because I love service work and I love going out. I was part of hospitals institutions as well. So I go to like the detox centers, the hospitals and talk. And I joined BACA because I liked helping people and now I wanted to help kids. So my whole life became service to other people. But at the same time, service wasn't fulfilling me in a way that I needed to be fulfilled because I wasn't who I was. I was running by policy and not by Steven. Do you know what I mean? H&I has a policy, you have to conduct yourself this way. BACA has a policy, you have to conduct yourself this way. Area meetings are Robert's Rule of Order, so you have to conduct yourself in the way that the meeting dictates you to. And so as I'm trying to find myself, I'm becoming policy. Like I wasn't Steven. So I kind of got lost in the service work. But I liked helping people. So I ended up relapsing because helping people wasn't enough. I didn't know who I was.
So you only kind of like relapsed once or twice, and then back to Pine Lodge,
83
or?
days. 83 days I relapsed for. I ended up with 3 felony charges, a domestic violence, an assault, and a drinking and driving. So in Canada, drinking and driving is a felony for the American guys, which is not true, or it's state um, in the States. Anyway, so I had all charges dropped because
Really?
just yeah, it was just the circumstances that happened. I was attacked by my girlfriend, but because I was drunk, the cops took me away.
Right,
Um,
right.
and so all my assault charges were dropped. And I was intoxicated when I was driving, but because of the way that the cops handled me at the hospital, and they forcefully withdrew blood, made the doctors withdraw blood, uh, they had to drop the charges and all that kind of stuff. So it was just kind of like a godsend. And it gave me, don't worry, it's not, it's old blood, honey. Um, she's very concerned about blood. So it gave me an opportunity to revisit my sobriety because I just had a close call. And I like to call those like forced hand moments, right? I was placed in a situation where something was really bad and I needed to figure it the fuck out. And if I didn't, things were going to go worse. And I feel like because I started back on the road to recovery, that my court proceedings, you know, um, vanished, right? My
Right.
charges vanished because the universe just saw me putting in that good karma again. And since then, like I quit my job. I worked as a truck driver at an oil refinery. It wasn't appeasing my soul. Um, I quit that. I quit BACA because it was just too much work. I quit all my service work, NA, because I was relapsing. And I decided because I'm not doing anything with my life that's making me happy, I'm going to move to Calgary, take my addiction counselor's course, and become an addictions counselor. Um, because everyone that gets clean thinks they're going to become a fucking addictions counselor. And guess what? I did. Yay. And how cheesy is it, right?
Man, you were my hero then. I was like, because I wanted to. I can't go to school. I just can't.
Yeah.
I can't keep a job for longer than 2 years, so I can't imagine going to school for 4 just so I could quit another job. But I was like, damn, Steve's doing it right on. And I knew a bit of your story. I knew you were like on Hastings Street and shit. Like I was like, fuck, this dude came from like coming out of the gutters to like make a difference, and it's fucking inspiring and awesome. You were a bit of an inspiration for me to like do some advocating and stuff like that too. So yeah.
No, and you know what? The whole journey was so that I could get people to see that they can do it. Because service work is my number one thing. Service work is number one. If you're getting clean, you need to be able to give yourself back to your community, right? You can freely take from it, so you can freely fucking give back. And I freely took a lot, right? I took souls, not just because I'm ginger, but because I helped introduce Saskatchewan to crystal meth. We would go on tours and sell crystal meth to people in the rural area. Like we destroyed families. I literally destroyed part of this province in my seeking of drug usage, right? So what do I need to do? I need to give back as much as I fucking can. And if people are looking at me as a good influence on them, I go, thank you, but not me. It's just what I'm doing. It's the behaviors that I have because I need to. It's my forced hand. I have to do this, or I will go right back to the way I was. Um, you have to put your service work in, but you have to find yourself who you are. So when I went and did my course in Calgary, I love school. And as an ADHD person in high school, I fucking hated school. So it's just this weird kind of thing. But I'm good at university because it's something I care about and I like to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's well with ADHD, I'm finding not that I'm diagnosed yet, but it's like it's not that I don't have focus. It's that I only have focus for things I like doing.
Hmm.
So so yeah, if you were liking the courses and what you were why you were taking them and all that stuff, then yeah, you would be really good at it. Yeah.
Yeah, the hyperfixation is just amazing when it's directed properly, right? Yeah.
Yeah. On school, not math.
Yeah, exactly. No, fuck math. I'm in a research class right now, and we were doing Pearson's R, and it and I understood it, and it's like x to minus, what are they're adding letters and numbers together, and I was like, oh no, don't do this to me. Oh wait, I understand that, but because I've been in university for like 5 years, I'm starting to understand how to learn. So,
Hmm.
and that's probably the thing.
And meds.
And meds, Concerta changed my life. Absolutely 100%. Um, but yeah, so in Calgary, I ended up getting a job at the safe consumption site as a peer support worker. I had heard about it and I was like, oh my God, I want that job. And I went down and I like handed in my resume like by hand multiple times and then online. And the manager there or the director there was like, "Oh, I'm seeing a lot of these resumes from this Steve guy. Maybe we'll give him a call." And so he gave me a call and he goes, "What do you know?" And I was like, "I am a Hastings survivor, gang affiliated, 2 years sober at this point, um, or just coming on 2 years sober at this point, and I want to help people because they're the ones. This is where I came from. Like street people is where I came from, and I just want to help them." And he goes like, "Fuck yeah, you got the job."
Hmm.
So my job there was to offer assistance in overdose response with paramedics and nurses and doctors. Um, and I was directly helping over 250 overdoses. I've bagged like a few hundred people, and I've watched people die and help bring them back to life. And it's just nothing like watching someone dead come back to life. And I just that's when I realized that this is it. Like this is what life is all about. Really helping people. And I finished my addiction counselor course uh, with a GPA of like 3.84, which is like a 93 or some shit like that. I didn't graduate high school, lived on Hastings, and I'm graduating with a 93 average. And it still wasn't enough. So we moved back to Regina because we had this kid here, Maybell, my ex, and she wanted to be close to her mom, and I'm like, I want more. So I started taking my social work. And now I'm in my last semester of social work. And I got a job at the hospital and I work at the secured youth detox with kids, like youth kids that are, you know, come from the hood, Moxon Flats, and they're coming off of fentanyl and crystal meth, and they don't go to school, and they're sex workers. They're like 13 years old. They're IV drug using sex workers. Their dads put them on the street. Like it's sad, but I feel at home there. I feel like they're my. When people go, how do you like it at Secured Youth? I go, I love my kids. And I'm not talking about Maybell and Graydon and Emily like my children. I'm talking about my kids at work. Like they're my kids too. Some of these teenagers are in and out all the time. They've been there like 6 or 7 times. And they're like, Steve, I love it. You're here. And I'm like, yeah, why the fuck are you? So like, you should have gotten clean when I told you to. Yeah. But I love them.
Hmm. Well, that's amazing, man. Now I'm comparing myself to you again. I can't go to school. I haven't gone to school. What am I doing? Sitting here talking to you.
You're
This
you're
is how low
offered,
I've gotten. I'm talking to you. No,
and you know what? 10 minutes before this, like 10 minutes before the interview, I was like, "Fuck yeah! Finally, the guy that talks to people is going to talk to me." right? And I'm like a little dark, you know?
You just needed a book.
Yeah, I just needed to write that fucking book. Um, yeah, man, like I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and I've seen the people that go on there, and then your trip up to where was that, Melfort, for that youth? Like, and when I typed in, I want to do stuff like that. Like, I wasn't being like, "Oh, good for you, Todd." I was like, "No, fuck yeah, awesome, man! Like, you're doing the shit that I want to do." So,
I know.
yeah, you can compare yourself as much as you want to anybody, but everyone's living a life that we envy in one way or another, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Actually, do you
maybe
remember
not. I don't want your
there?
mental health, and you don't want mine.
No. Do you remember Steven in Pine Lodge 2016? There was another guy named Steven, a taller guy
Yeah,
with glasses.
yeah, 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 yeah.
He told me when I was in Pine Lodge, because I remember being in there, like listening to people's stories and stuff, and I was like, what am I doing here? Like, I seem pathetic. It's like I like drinking beer and I get sad. It's like, like I was like, oh man, these people's stories are horrific, and like, I don't know, it was like weird. Like I knew I had a problem, but I didn't feel like I had that. I don't know, it was weird. But anyway, he pulled me aside and he was like, dude, do not compare yourself at all. You cannot compare pain. You cannot compare trauma. You cannot compare your sobriety. You cannot compare your addiction. He's like, he just laid into me, like, just shut the hell up. You're not here on accident, dude. Like, that's, and I was like, oh, cool. So then I used that because I worked at Pine Lodge for a couple of years. I used that with other clients that would do that. And then Steve came back as a client, actually.
Yeah.
And we had a good reunion, and yeah, it was awesome. And I let him know how inspiring that speech was. So I'm not. I mean, I was just kind of teasing that I was comparing myself to you because I know not to, but
Yeah.
it's all very inspiring and impressive that I watch your journey and think I wish I could go to school. maybe the meds. If I get meds, I'll be able to.
And you know what? That was the day it all turned around. That's when going to school became better because I understood more, right? Yeah, I can't wait for you to get your meds. But it can go either way because also when I got my meds, yeah, like my understanding and my processing and my focus got a little bit better. But at the same time, I kind of lost a little bit of drive. That innate drive that I had, the conservative kind of dumbed it down. So now I have to push myself to have the drive. So, I mean, there's pros and cons.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. I sincerely love watching you thrive and just doing good stuff for the world, really, for addicts and mental health and for the youth. So, yeah, I think it's awesome. Keep up the good work. And if you want to support Stephen, and you want to just, even if you don't care about supporting him, you just want to hear more of his awesome story, please go to Amazon and purchase Punx Not Dead, Punx, Punx. Now, next week I'm speaking with Trash, a former guest who has DID, dissociative identity disorder. But next week we're going to talk about histrionic disorder, and I'd like to tell you about a few other guests that are coming up. I'm speaking with a gentleman named Nigel. He's an ADHD coach. I've deep dived for quite a while now about ADHD, and boy, he talks a lot, that Nigel. So anyway, we're going to hear from Nigel. I'm also talking to Chris, and Chris is a former Scientologist. He was even in the Sea Org program that they have. I don't know if you know what that means, but if you do, then you know he's kind of a bigwig in the Scientology. And we're talking about cults and Scientology and just the mental health effects it has trying to escape cults and what it's like for family watching someone else in a cult and all that kind of fun stuff. And as I mentioned before, Juno also has DID, or dissociative identity disorder. Juno's is different than Trash's though, so listen to that one because it's also very fascinating. She's just a sweet person. And I'm also going to be talking to Amy, and Amy is a survivor of Columbine shooting, and she has a podcast that she did, a podcast series for the 20-year anniversary, I believe, of the Columbine shooting. And we're going to talk to her about being a survivor and PTSD and all that kind of stuff. And hey, by the way, I love getting comments questions and whatnot, please follow the podcast on social media. Bunny Hugs Podcast on Instagram, Bunny Hugs Podcast on TikTok, Bunny Hugs and Mental Health on Facebook. And please, for crying out loud, seriously, please leave a review and a rating if you are listening on Apple or whatever you're listening on. If you're able to review this and leave some kind of feedback, please do that. I would love to hear that. And it actually helps. Do it to all podcasts that you listen to, because it really helps out all podcasters. It really does. So yeah, that's all I got this week. So please remember to make your beds and take your meds. Bye.